Hey, welcome everybody. This is the first official Operational Reset podcast. This is brought to you by the Tactical Resilience Training System. This is the system that officers use that includes the Operational Reset Stack. These are stacks of protocols officers use in real time on duty to reset and train their nervous system. So if you want that, you can go to Joe Swanson Tactical, get that, follow on Instagram at Joe Swanson Tactical, click that link in the bio, get that program, look for one of our live workshops coming up. And I'm super excited to dive into this with my first guest, Orion Bad Karma Mata. He and I became acquainted through a mutual friend of ours and a mentorship program. I'm an advocate for mentorship, and he and I are in the same program. And so we started chatting, and man, this guy's got a story to tell. And I teased it a little bit on the stories today, man, on Instagram. But welcome, Orion. Appreciate you, man.
Oh, I appreciate you having me on, man. This is super exciting. This is my first podcast appearance, so we'll see how it goes. But
I love it, man.
So we just want to start kind of like with my history. I've been in
Yeah.
law enforcement for just over 30 years now. Enlisted in the DEP program in the Army in
Okay.
1994. Shipped out about 2.5 weeks after I graduated from northern Michigan to Fort McClellan, Alabama in the middle of the summer, which was a definite culture shock. Uh,
Yeah.
so I enlisted I went in to be an MP, uh, 95 Bravo at the time, and I'm pretty sure I got screwed over. They probably needed to fill some slots in the 95 Charlie corrections specialist. Uh, they were probably short on those, so that's what I ended up going in as, was a corrections
Okay.
specialist. Graduated as one of my platoon's honor graduate um, for basic training, and then I arrived at the United States Disciplinary Barracks Maximum Security Prison in Fort Leavenworth in November of '95.
What
Shortly
was
after,
the
go
Yeah,
ahead.
what was the biggest, like, going from a young kid, right, and first kind of experience, big culture shock? What was the biggest like thing that you remember going into that now prison, into corrections? Like, what was the biggest shift for you that you had to make?
Um, so I grew up in a pretty small town. I think I had like 105 people in my graduating class, maybe even less than
Yeah,
that. It might have been 95. Now that I think about it. Um,
64 here.
yeah, just going into there, and it kind of set the tone for my hypervigilance issues, like right out
Okay.
of the gate at 18 years old, because like every single freaking inmate was trying to get over on you for something, especially as a new guy and a young kid. They're like, hey, can I get an extra this, or can you give me 5 more minutes here? Well, once they were able to crack somebody, then they kept asking for more, and they'd ask for more and ask for
Right.
more. And I had classmates that went to the DV with me, and they end up getting jammed up and just falling. Once inmate gets their hooks in you, you're done. So that was kind of what it was. You know, I say I was a latchkey kid. My dad was a foreman for a bridge crew, so there'd be 2 or 3 weeks growing up in high school that I'd just be on my own. He'd send a
Mhm.
friend over to take me grocery shopping or whatever. So like, cooking for myself, cleaning, doing my own laundry. That was old hat at
Yeah.
when I joined the army. So that pretty much wasn't a culture shock.
Hmm.
And from playing football for 5 years in high school, it was just like joining another team. Like
Yeah.
joining the army. Except we got to play with guns and stuff, so that was pretty cool.
Yeah. That's fun.
Yeah.
And so, how long were you in that position um, before moving on?
So I was in the army for a total of 8.5 years. shortly after I got to the DV, so I got there in November, and I want to say it was March or April. We had a riot in one of our domiciles,
Kicked it off
and
right away.
oh, it was insane. And shortly before the riot, we had a they were called satellites, and they used to be the old dining facilities where they'd feed the inmates in the actual wings themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But the inmates would just go in there and play games and stuff. And I had an altercation where I was kind of trapped in there. There was a door on one end and a door on the other, and it was full of inmates. And just try to correct an inmate, and things got heated. And I was like, "Holy shit, man!" Like, and 18 years old, I was still, I was a big guy in pretty good shape. Just graduating basic training. But I mean, these guys were in prison, working out, and they were prison swole. So I was like, I'm gonna get my fucking ass kicked in here, And
Yeah.
they took a friend of ours hostage, um,
Oh, wow.
beat him, beat him so severe that the next day when we went to see him in the hospital, not only was he not recognizable as our friend, if you looked at him, like, you couldn't even hardly tell it was a human being. Eyes were completely swollen shut, like from one side of his head here all the way down to his neck was just, I mean, you couldn't even see his ear. It was just
Wow.
swollen like that. It was terrible. Um, so that was right out of the gate there. And um, shortly after that, because of that incident, I was like, I want to get on SRT because those are the guys that, went in and, you know, introduced munitions and things like that
Yeah.
to kind of soften it so we could get in the main gate, And during that riot, really kind of opened my eyes to what happens like when people are under pressure, because the NCOIC, the non-commissioned officer in charge of the wing, there's protocols that we had, like kill the power to the cell doors, drop all the keys down. We had drop boxes, so if we were getting overrun, we could drop all the keys and the inmates couldn't get to anything.
Mm-hmm.
That dude not only left his soldier in there, but he left the guard cage wide open, and
Oh
it was
my
like
God.
free reign to the whole fucking place. It was insane.
Wow.
So when we went in to quell that riot, it was like a movie, to be honest. I mean, there was the lights from the towers are going back and forth, and they set a ton of fires. Um, Other inmates were being assaulted. I remember them
Mm-hmm.
bringing one guy down on a gurney past us, and it literally looked like you were squeezing a sponge. I mean, they had some towels and stuff wrapped up around his neck, but just blood just dripping off of him, and them recovering like stacks of weapons, like
Sure.
shin high, where they were breaking beds apart and all that stuff. And
Wow.
yeah,
What
it was pretty intense.
coming out of that? I mean, this is you're a young guy in shape, but this is like your first real, other than normal kind of traumatic experiences that we have as teenagers potentially. Like this is real life trauma that's happening. How
Yeah.
did you deal with that at that point, like early on?
Well, we were there was a lot of us that were pretty angry,
Hmm.
because so the different companies had different domiciles. We each had a medium custody domicile, uh, uh, what, medium. So there was a maximum downstairs, medium, the trustee units, the uh, minimum security domiciles.
Hmm.
So, a lot of us wanted them to switch the medium custody domicile responsibilities, so we
Hmm.
weren't working with the same inmates that just beat the shit out of our friend and almost killed him.
Right.
And they weren't having that. You know what I mean? So now you got to go back in, and be professional with the same guys that just try to kill your friend. You know, and
That's tough.
that was hard. Now the guys that actually assaulted him and stuff, they were moved obviously to maximum security um, punishment, and then a lot of them were moved over to the actual federal prison system.
Hmm. Okay.
after that.
Because
But it was still hard.
was this all military people, or what were, like, who were the inmates in this particular situation?
So
Because you were
all the
working for
inmates,
the military.
yeah, all the inmates at the DB are all former military.
Okay.
You know, they got jammed up for whatever reason. You know, being at the prison there.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. So you did that for you were in the Army for 8.5 years. What was that transition like, leading up to you leaving? I don't want to get into where you went after that, but what were your thoughts like coming up to that?
So the reason that I left, so I was slated to go. So I ended up going, becoming a sergeant, E5. Had my own squad. Was the team lead for our snipers at the prison. Ran all the training,
Hmm.
kept training records, qualifications, all that stuff. But then when 9/11 happened, I volunteered to go. I went to my
Mm.
battalion commander and I was like, "Hey, if anyone goes from this unit, I want to go." But because we were on SRT, we were all frozen
Mm.
because we were basically force protection for post if anything were to happen on Fort Leavenworth. When they finally started moving people around, one of the guys went to work as a subject matter expert for one of the generals on detainee ops
Mm.
because we were taking those guys, taking a lot of prisoners over there and locking them up. And then they wanted to send me to Korea to the facility out there, and I'm like, "Fuck you! I want to go to Afghanistan." You know what I mean? And that was really what caused me to get out. I was ready to go to BNOC to become a staff sergeant and continue my career, and I probably would have retired from the Army had they sent me over to Afghanistan.
Yeah, yeah. So and at this point you're probably what, 26, 27?
Let's see, 17, 24, 24, 25, somewhere in there.
Okay, so younger. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
interesting. So what do you make this decision?
Yeah, I celebrated my 18th birthday in boot camp. So,
Yep, love it. Your early,
yeah, so
early,
I
early
made
one.
that decision. So I've always wanted to be a cop. I think I made that decision at like 7 years old and never changed it. Never changed what I wanted to do.
Interesting.
Yeah. Um, and so I was like, all right, I'm going to be a cop. And I ended up in the Kansas City area because I got married and had a son. So, and I was like, well, so I just started putting applications in all over. Got picked up by one of the municipalities just in a suburb of Kansas City, and have been working for them ever since. So I started back in the jail, um, working there, and then worked
Okay.
at the police academy part time until I graduated. So,
Okay. And so
then
you
I was
came
married.
out. What? Yeah. What was that transition like?
It was different. It definitely was different. And it was really different when
I
I
hear
got
a
into the
lot of.
police academy.
Okay. Yeah. I hear a lot of guys talk about that transition from corrections to, street policing, and it's so, yeah, they have a hard time in aspects of it, but also the thing is they already understand a bit of the criminal mind, and um, so they're aware of that, so they know how to talk with the people that they're arresting, essentially.
Yeah, I definitely had a leg up on that, on being able to communicate with people. And
Yeah.
obviously being on SRT for as long as I was, the tactics part, and I was one of the lead instructors for our battalion for defensive tactics, so that, I was way more comfortable than a lot of people, coming out on the street. You know what I mean? I'd been doing it
Right.
for 8.5 years, mixed it up quite a bit when I was in the Army, you know what I mean? And never had any issues. So I was way more prone right out of the gate to go hands on than
Hmm.
a lot of people coming out of there, and I was able to talk to people a little bit better because I've been doing it for a long time, you know.
Right. Right. So you go into policing, mid 20s, and talk about those early years. Like
The early
what
years
was it
were
like?
really fun, I mean, like, just like anybody right out of the gate, you know what I mean? This is what I always wanted to do, so, I'm out hammering it. Was never a real big ticket writer type guy. I always wanted, like, you know, my thought was if we just go after the basic criminal element of our community, you know what I mean? Things are going to be safer and better for us. So, targeting drugs, known drug houses, known, guys that were involved in burglaries and, scrapping, stealing stuff, shit like that.
Yeah.
Going after those guys that had warrants and all that stuff. And I was really, really pretty successful doing that. And I don't know if I got like a sixth sense or something like that, you know what I mean? But I'll just have something in my head that'll be like, hey, you should go check this house. And I did one day, and there was three guys sitting in a van, and they literally just ripped all of the wiring out of an abandoned building on the Richards-Gebauer, I think it was an Air Force base.
Okay.
So like 1,400 pounds of wiring was in the back of
Wow.
this freaking van. You know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
had some pretty good calls like right out of the gate, and was able to handle them. I think within my first year, I had a suicide by cop.
Wow.
But she was trying to commit suicide by cop. And honestly, the only reason I didn't shoot her was because as I was honing in, I could see the houses right behind her. And I was like, oh,
Not clear downrange.
yeah, so I need to reposition myself. It was at a softball game. She tried
Oh,
to run
wow.
her husband over, like drove her car out on the softball field trying to run him over. And
Wow.
and then when I made contact with her, she pulled a knife on me. And so I was able to just kind of reposition myself around the front of my car, which cleared me hot because there was no houses behind her, but it also gave me a barrier
Yeah.
that she was going to have to negotiate to get to me. So I was able to, kind of slow things down, get on the radio, and had another unit come in from the other side of her and tase her, and we were able to take her into
Okay.
custody without too much of an incident. But yeah,
Yeah.
that was like
Well,
right
it's
out
good
of the
the
gate. That was
taser
within my
worked.
first year.
Is that right? Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That can happen. It can happen day one. Like
Oh yeah.
when you get into this job, it can be day one, you hope that you have the team around you and the department backing you in those types of situations, and the capacity to make those notifications on the radio and get your team involved in a tactical way. I mean, I think you know, it's why I teach what I teach, is to give people that better reaction time and better decision making in those moments where your nervous system is just spike activation on the sympathetic side,
Oh,
and you have to
for sure.
access.
I've seen people just vapor lock on calls.
Yes.
You know what I mean? They're
Yep.
just like frozen, you know.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
like literally, like once you start realizing that you get tunnel vision, you have to recognize it. You got to take a couple deep breaths, and if you just move and disrupt your own OODA loop, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Now everything opens back up, and things kind of get back to a more cohesive state for you, where you can make better decisions.
Yeah. So you had some early action, early activity. Obviously, this is what we talk about here on this podcast, is this stacking of these experiences, right? So the stuff that you dealt with in the Army, now you're out in policing, and this stress load is stacking, right? These experiences stack on us. And if we don't have the knowledge or the capacity to reset from them, to effectively, shift those experiences, it becomes a huge challenge, and can be a huge officer safety risk. As you moved into your career, what did you do? Did you end up on SWAT? Did you end up using some of those tactical things you learned in the Army? What was sort of the path of your career in law enforcement before we get to some of the big investigations that you did that really, I think you were doing at the time where your family's life and the things cursory to your work were sort of breaking down?
Yeah, so I actually got onto our SWAT team, SRT, before my probation period was even up. I mean,
Wow.
I was a operator and sniper, police sniper in the Army. They sent me to the FBI sniper school prior to me even being complete my first year on patrol. And I've been on SWAT ever since there, and I've been, with that department for 22, 23 years now. FBI sniper school is kind of fun. And just real quick, a story on that is,
Please.
Our stalk exercise, I misunderstood the parameters of it, and it was basically a pinwheel target where they have different targets on there, and each pinwheel has its own number, and they wanted you to identify the top right number. Well, I thought you were supposed to get as close as possible, so I took forever on that stalk, and basically the entire class was done, and they were all looking for me, and I got to within about 30, 40 yards of the entire group and was able to set up in a pine tree, like a little evergreen, to get my number. And I was like, oh shit, I won. And they're like, no, this other guy won because he had like a 50 power scope that he fucking scoped from, the tree line way in the back. So I was kind of pissed about that, but I was like, they were pretty impressed that I was able to get that close, undetected.
Yeah. Amazing. So you're already showing promise.
Yeah. So
That's awesome.
So yeah, like when I was on patrol, and you get hit with all of those traumatic events, like you and I were talking on the phone the other day about that, and you're just bombarded with them. You know what I mean? You're getting hit with one a week, and sometimes multiple a day. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
Literally like picking up body parts in the median, or what I mean, like getting in serious life or death situations, where I had one call, and I've always felt like I've been mostly able to control it, and it was a domestic violence. The guy pulled the stove out and kicked the gas line open, and as soon as I got out of the car, the whole neighborhood smelled like gas, and I was like,
oof.
literally like in front of the neighbor's house, outside of this house, and we weren't sure if the victim was still in there or not. And I'm like, if this goes, like, I'm done. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I had to go in and make sure the victim was not in the house, and then obviously we evac'd and fire came in and shut the gas off. But yeah, I mean, in that instance, like, I'd have been fucked. If
Right. And you have to make that decision like in the moment. Like there's not a lot of time. You can't hem and haw about it. You have to go, all right, am I going in knowing that this could be it?
right.
I'm here to protect and serve, right? This is my purpose, and I know it could be bad, but do you have the capacity to go and do that and not melt and not
Right.
freeze in that situation, but make the notifications that you need to make to get fire en route, to get ambulance en route, to get other units en route, set up a perimeter, do all of those things that one needs to do tactically, and then go and handle business.
Right.
And police officers are like, it's real. They're put with those decisions every day.
Oh yeah.
Like one of the things that I loved doing was we had simulators that we would do simulators, and I always tell people, if you can ever get to a simulator, I've heard other people talk about this, like get to a simulator and go and have to make those decisions in the moment, or see what your reaction time is when, did you even see that gun in the car when you were doing that traffic stop? What happens if, how are you going to control this person with your voice and try to de-escalate? And I mean, if more people did that. I've seen a video where a news anchor went and did one of those simulators and came out of it with a completely different perspective on policing, respect for policing, and I think it would change the view and public perception of the split second decisions that law enforcement professionals are making in service of their communities.
Yeah, so I volunteer. Before I went to the detective unit, I would volunteer for Citizens Academy. And the amount of times that I got shot for literally just like throwing my hands up in the air or something like that is
Right.
amazing. So,
Yeah.
a lot of the critics of police and stuff like that, it's real easy to armchair quarterback that shit and not realize, one, the body cam only captures so much. You know what I mean?
Right.
And the body cam, given the lighting conditions, could affect, like the human eye is a lot different than that stupid camera. And,
Right.
What you can perceive and what the camera can perceive may not coincide,
Right.
So
Yeah.
a lot of those critics do that. And I actually watched one where a guy went through, huge critic, and I think it was down in Texas. The guy was literally like ace two people on non-shoot situations, just, and he's like, all right, maybe that kind of opened my eyes a little bit about
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
how nerves and stuff kind of play into that shit.
Yeah.
And, so yeah, doing that stuff and being on patrol, and I was a master patrolman. My sergeant and another officer got in a fight while I was off, and he was out for a long time. So I was the stand-in. So it was our corporal basically became the sergeant, and I basically became the corporal, even though I didn't get paid for it. But it is what it is.
Sure. Yeah.
So on the days my corporal was off, I was in charge of the shift. You know what I mean? And being a supervisor really kind of opens your eyes to
It does.
some of the trouble. And obviously we're shorthanded if I'm being the supervisor. So
Yeah.
I know one night we had freezing rain, so there was accidents all over the place, and I was out on an accident. I had two guys out on an armed disturbance, and another guy was on an accident, and we had a stabbing at the bar. So,
Right.
Some guy got stabbed in the neck. I'm like, oh shit! And like literally, as I was checking on my people and walking back to my car, a car came off the on-ramp onto the highway and was literally just spinning towards my car and probably stopped 20 feet short of
Jeez.
my car. So I'm calling for mutual aid. Everyone's tied up on accidents. There's nobody
Right.
available. So it's just me and one other officer going in, and this guy's stabbed in the neck. There's blood fucking everywhere, and the bar was packed.
Wow.
So
Yeah, sure.
trying to handle that, was tough, and like all that stuff builds up, but when you're getting hit with it every single day or several times a week or a month, it doesn't register. And it didn't really start registering until I went to my position on the task force, and I was sitting in my car for 8, 10, 12, 16 hours at a time on surveillance, you know what I mean? And when you slow down, that's when that shit started creeping up, and those, you put that shit in a little box and you put it on the shelf, well, those boxes started leaking.
Yeah. Tell me about that experience, because I think like it's important to have these types of conversations about people that had the awareness of what they now were observing, right? So that officers who are still in that high speed day-to-day activity can take a quick moment and say, okay, am I observing some of that in myself? Is my reaction time, is my decision making foggy? Is my patience not there. What were the things that you saw when you sat in those long moments that started cueing you into, hey, something's going on?
Well, I think a lot of it was like the cynicism that I had towards the
Mm.
public in general, because you're sitting there, you're in a clandestine environment, nobody knows you're there, you know what I mean, and you're just watching
Hmm.
people, and you're like, maybe they're not all shitheads, you know what I mean, and
Yeah.
and that's one of the things that I recommend to some of the younger guys is like, this job will make you super cynical of people. And,
Yeah.
I don't care if it's Kansas City, you know what I mean, if it's one of the suburbs, if it's out, in the country, you're probably dealing with less than 1/2% of the population on a regular
Right.
basis. Everyone
Right.
else is traffic accidents or, my car got broken into, they're
Right.
victims of crimes, but it's those repeated calls to the same fucking houses that just
Hmm.
feel like everyone in this town's a fucking asshole,
Right.
and that's not the case at all. So I always recommend, for guys that are on like maybe 2, 3 years, I'm like, dude, go to the park and watch families
Mm.
and just be like, all right, these are the people I'm out here for. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we don't get to uh, go sit down with people for Thanksgiving or be in their living room and
Yeah.
watch their kids open Christmas presents. We get called when drunk Uncle Bob takes the turkey and throws it across the room. So
Right. Right.
you know
Yeah.
that is that's one of the things that I realized right out of the gate, and
Yeah.
then um, kind of looking back at that time, and you start thinking about some of those calls, and they kind of resurface. You know what I mean? Because
Hmm.
you literally just buried them, and when you got nothing but time to sit and think about stuff,
Yeah.
that's when it hits you. And I think that may be what gets a lot of our retirees too. You know what I mean? Like a
I think
career
so
full of
too.
that stuff, and they slow
Yeah, now
down.
they go from high speed to just like
Right.
nothing, and they lose the camaraderie, they lose the connection, even the shit talking and the having fun and briefings and out at coffee, and their wife's telling them to go. I was talking to a buddy just about this the other day, and he's like, "Yeah, my wife says go golf," and I tell her, "Great, I'll go golf. I love golfing, but who am I going with? My
Right.
buddy's working still, you know my family's at at the department, or my friend group is at the department. This is what I also say is like, cultivate. This is the outer ring of wellness I talk about. Cultivate your community, whether that's spiritual or friend group, and cultivate some of it outside of the department so that you can pick up those relationships and engage in them more once you're transitioning out. I think you're right, man. And I think those two big things you hit on, some big ones. The cynicism, I think, comes from, like, you can early identify that, right? It's easy because you can see the Debbie Downers in the at roll call, and you
Right.
can say, okay, what are the qualities that I'm seeing in that person that I don't want to have? And did I do that the other day? Oh yeah, wow, I said that. I might be leaning towards this. This is early burnout signs. When you start to have that cynicism that you're talking about, and then as you get on longer in one's career, and maybe you're around that retirement age, hopefully you've been able to like quell that cynicism. But then there's other challenges that you hit when you retire, and now you're not in this community. And I dealt with that even just being on 8 years and then transitioning out of law enforcement into other things, missing that camaraderie, missing that esprit de corps, like that connection.
Yeah, and I actually talked about it in one of my videos the other day, about hypervigilance, and I
Yeah.
think the reason that I'm more comfortable, um, going out with a group of cops or the guys in my motorcycle club or other soldiers is I know that everyone is scanning. You know what I mean? So it lowers
Yep.
my sector to a little bit, and I can relax a little bit because
Yeah.
But like when I'm out with my family and stuff, man, like
You're the
I'm like,
one. You're the protector.
yeah, yeah, you're the single point of failure. You know what I mean? So you gotta fucking watch everybody. And I got four kids. My three boys, when they were younger, they're 13 months apart, all three of them. So trying to keep track of those little son of bitches were hard. They're
Yeah,
running
for
around,
sure.
and you're like, okay, I got two here, and one will be, climbing a tree or some other shit like that, running
Yeah.
around. So, not only are you trying to keep track of them, but you're trying to keep them safe. And
Yeah.
I did some retrospect and thinking about that, and I've only had to draw my weapon one time off duty, uh,
Mm.
and that wasn't even had nothing to do with me. It was just two bums fighting on the side of the road. The one guy got knocked down, and the guy that knocked him down went and picked up a giant chunk of concrete and was
Boulders.
going to smash the
Wow.
guy. You know what I mean? And I was just like, hey, drop it and walk away. And
Yeah.
that was it. So
Whew. Yeah. But how does one, like, as you've identified this, right? This hypervigilance. And I think it's something that most cops, I know I dealt with it. Most cops, I think, deal with it at some point. Um, and how did you start to reverse that? Like, obviously, you can't reverse it all the way because you have to be aware and you have to have situational awareness. But how do you take it from a place where it's unproductive and taking away time with family to being something that is productive for you and for your family and in protection?
yeah, so one of the exercises that was recommended to me was go to those places like the mall or those places that cause you high stress and go there by yourself and just observe and
Mm.
realize 99.9% of the people out there aren't up to any shenanigans. you know
Right.
and and you're just out there and you're like, okay, you know what I mean? You can
Yeah.
kind of de-escalate yourself and kind of re-regulate yourself and reorient yourself to that, and then talk to your family about it. And just the biggest thing that I've noticed that it steals is your attention. So
Hmm.
they just look like you're not paying attention to them.
Yes.
Your wife's showing you this purse or this, whatever. Oh, I really like this, and then you forget about it because you weren't really listening. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And you got to ask her what she wants for her birthday or Valentine's Day, whatever.
Yeah.
And had you been listening, you would have already known. You know,
Yeah.
so it makes
And
your
in
family think that you don't want to be there with them.
Right. I think that's the big like disconnect, right? You're thinking that, hey, I'm doing a good thing by protecting my family. Your family sees this guy's just disconnected. And
Right.
so and then because of this misperception, I think that it causes frustration, tension. The wife, the partner doesn't feel seen or heard. You don't feel seen or heard because you're trying to do something good. I love that what you said about going and just de-escalating yourself by observing and practice your situational awareness and your internal awareness at the same time, which
Yeah.
is amazing, man. I want to get to some of the work you did in this task force and how did that come about? And then as you're sitting in the, you alluded to these long moments of sitting and having to be with yourself. Um, at what point did it really like become apparent? Was it that the life was just sort of falling apart? Because I know you talk about that quite a bit. Yeah, unpack a little bit of that for me.
Okay, so I go out to the task force, and it's a federal task force. I'm a federal task force officer on a long-term investigations group investigating narcotics, and it was amazing. Like I was made to do that shit. You know what I mean? Like I'm very fluent in shithead. So, like deciphering their code
Sure.
and stuff like that was pretty easy. And loved the work, and dove into it. I want to learn as much as I could, for like the first probably 18 months, you know what I mean? I was volunteering for everything, like, oh, we got to go out, we got surveillance tonight, I'll do that, you know what I mean, and all that. And at the same time, at home, our oldest son was fucking off at school, um, skipping school, ended up dropping out, ended up moving out, and was couch surfing and all that stuff. And
Mm.
basically, that's kind of where things started, like just going off the rails. Um, that's all my wife and her mom could talk about. My daughter was in dance. Every year since I don't remember when she started, maybe 3 years old or something like that. You know
Right.
what I mean? And everything was all about her. She's the only girl and just the little princess. And when all that shit started going on, she quit dance. Um, I was trying to make my thoughts on the situation heard, and was basically told to fuck off because he was my stepson, even though I was in his life since he was 3 years old.
Right.
You know what I mean? And that was a real kick in the nuts because, like, I'm expected, I provided for him, you know what I mean? House, food, clothes, you know what I mean? All that stuff. And um, was expected to be a father figure. But then when, I wanted to be like, hey,
Fathering was needed. It
yeah,
was like,
when fathering was
kick
needed, I was
rocks.
told to kick rocks, you know what I mean? Um, so I picked up woodworking. Actually started with just one project. Some friends of mine were getting screwed over on pricing on something. I was like, I could build that way cheaper for you, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And built some things from there. And I was like, yeah, I really enjoy this. And I've always been a craftsman, you know what I mean? If I wanted something made, I hate paying other people to do shit, so I just
Hmm.
did it myself. And so I started that, and it kind of filled that. Not only was it a way for me to control my environment, and I
Hmm.
basically built like a sniper hide in the garage. You know, um,
Yeah.
I'm a big guy. I'm 6 foot, 235 pounds, um, but I could disappear in somebody's yard.
Hmm.
Just and just from years of doing that. Um, so basically, that's what I did. That I could control that environment. You
Hmm.
know, and by producing um, these custom projects for people, I felt appreciated. Again, my
Hmm.
efforts felt appreciated, which I didn't feel inside my own home. You know, and then during that same time, my daughter had a tablet that she would play games on and stuff. Well, that broke, and it was cheaper to get her a phone. And
Hmm.
we handed her a phone, and honestly, we might as well have handed her a loaded heroin needle. That's how
Well,
that's how fucking toxic that shit is. And so things just started kind of going off the rails. I feel a lot of guilt because
hmm.
my other kids needed me to step in because my wife was preoccupied with our oldest, and I just went and did my own thing.
Hmm.
Uh, and that's kind of where my daughter's struggles started, was because of that. So, dad's absent. Well, there's plenty of predators online that'll step in and give you the attention that you're looking for. So it wasn't until I went to a post-critical incident seminar that's put on by Missouri Highway Patrol, and they talked about like guys that work like excessive off duty or those side gigs like my woodworking
Hmm.
stuff, and how that is, you justify it because you're making money. And honestly, I made better money doing that than I did as a cop.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
but it's a way to isolate yourself, and you just justify it because you're bringing in extra cash and supporting your family,
Yeah.
and you're absent. So for all you guys that are working, oh, I got off duty this weekend. I can't do this. Money comes and goes, man. The time with your family is got to be your number one priority.
Yeah, man, I love that you said this, and I want to unpack a few things that you kind of mentioned and alluded to here. The first one is this creative venture that you were doing. I experienced this myself. I would been a tattooer since the mid 90s, and I was a tattooer before I went into law enforcement and after. And it's where I was real good at it, and I got a lot of validation from it. And it wasn't until later on in life where I realized that I was using that as an isolation tool as well. Yeah, I would go and, hey, wife, I'm going to go and tattoo, this weekend, make $1,000 or $1,500 or, whatever it was. And again, I'm justifying it. But what am I really doing? I'm isolating away from the disconnection that I'm feeling with my wife, the impatience that I'm feeling with my kids. And I'm going to a place where I feel validated. I feel affirmed. I feel these, things that I should be creating for myself internally, but I'm letting it happen externally. And so this is, when you mentioned this the other day on the phone, I was like, whoa, man, this is it's more prevalent than we think. Whether it's those extra overtime gigs or it's the side hustle job that you're doing, it's whatever it is, be mindful of that. Are you seeking that validation from it outside of yourself and using it as an isolation tool to avoid the things that you may need to remedy? Because disconnected relationships and impulsive activities are plaguing law enforcement, and they have been for many, many years. And I think it stems from a place, a good place, right? You wanted to do something for a friend. Oh, I can do that for way cheaper for you, right? Oh, I wanted to make some, memory indelible on somebody's skin. That's a great thing. So we can get pulled in. This is sort of like this burnout and these ideas of isolation and how trauma affects us is pretty insidious. And so when did you identify that? Like you said, you went to this CISM seminar and they talked about it. When you heard that and you became a little bit aware, how did it adjust what you were doing?
Oh man, I literally sat there and I thought about it, and I'm like, in the task force, it was a very demanding job. I mean, I've had 120 plus hours overtime on a 2-week check.
Right.
So just constantly humping it. But, when I was doing that stuff, my regular job was basically like 2 full-time jobs. And then I took another full-time job on in the wood shop. So I would get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, be out in the wood shop until it was time to get, I'd come home, shower, go to work until whenever we got done. And if I had time, unless it was too late, I'd be in the wood shop until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And then my weekends were completely eaten up with that if I wasn't actually working. And I was like, man, no wonder. And then that whole time, I'm also self-medicating. I wasn't getting drunk every day, but I was drinking every day. You know what I mean? Like, I'd stop and get a half pint of whatever on the way home, just to kind of bring. It was kind of like, all right, it wasn't like, oh, good, I got to go home. It was like, fuck, I got to go home. You know what I mean?
Wow. That's another cue, officers. If you are feeling that way, check yourself. Touch base with somebody, have a check-in, go talk about this and unpack this with somebody, because
and I was so wrapped up in it, I didn't even realize it until until the stuff kind of came out with my daughter. So basically, what ended up happening with her, we knew she was doing some inappropriate stuff on the phone. So we thought we took the steps to figure it out. And I'll tell you what,
Mm-hmm.
fucking kids are smart. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And she found a back door through Pinterest to get to the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And basically found some stuff on there where there was some definite grooming stuff going on. And we were at the FBI office the next day. That's still an ongoing case, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But basically
Sure.
turned over her identity and her phone to them and let them do their thing. And kudos to the guys that worked that, because I work dope and I love working dope, but knowing those guys are out there hurting kids and being able
Mm-hmm.
to remain professional, um, unreal. And
Unreal. Yeah.
some of the shit that you guys see, hats off to you, because I don't know if I could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's tough. And yeah, you're right. Kudos to them. And because it happens left and right. I was just listening to a podcast where they're talking about Roblox. I was literally playing Roblox with my son the other day, and they were talking about how it is one of the biggest platforms for grooming and for these situations that come up. And again, if you're right, man, money comes and goes, but these relationships with our family, our kids, our communities, and some of those can come and go also, but your kids are going to be there, and um, you gotta make priorities. Like you
Yeah.
gotta really like reevaluate, and don't put it all on your partner to do it. You know.
No, and really, so after we turned her stuff over to the FBI, we checked her into a 3-month residential program,
Hmm.
which was super tough. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But we and she needed more help than what we could give her.
Right.
And, through family therapy and some of the revelations there is, my absence caused that attention seeking from other guys, from older men. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that was really, I was like, all right, I got to fucking figure out my shit. And, I go back and look at the situation, like with my oldest son, and during that time, and I was working so much, and really, at one point I got up to like 320 pounds.
Mm.
Obviously, didn't respect myself enough to,
Right.
I mean, even to look in the mirror, you know what I mean? Like I never really, I was disgusted by myself, so I just avoided, like if I had to shave or brush my teeth, that's all I would look in the mirror for. I never,
Hmm.
but going back and looking through pictures and stuff like that, and it's hard to expect people to respect you when you clearly don't respect yourself.
Right.
And
It's huge.
yeah, and that was one of the biggest things. And if you don't take care of yourself, people are going to lose faith in you to take care of them.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and
As
it's
this
completely
stuff,
understandable.
yeah, as this stuff was unfolding, what was the thought? Like, obviously, it's a long road ahead. Like, we have a long road ahead, right, to remedy some of these things. How did you make that transition to redemption and to adjustment, right? Going from this, again, speaking about like guys who are going, from high speed to braking and a completely different pace. How did you do that? Like, how did you do that mentally? How did you do that physically?
Well, one, it was a conscious decision to
Mm,
kind of unpack some of the stuff that had been going on. I did do some EMDR therapy and was able to tie
that's cool.
a so I had a smothered baby that haunted me for years.
Mm,
Parents rolled over on him in the middle of the night, or early in the morning, whatever. Um, I remember her handing me the baby, and I'm literally trying to breathe my life into him.
oof.
And you've been a cop, and some people, EMTs and stuff like that will understand. Like when you suffocate. The capillaries in your lungs burst, and there's blood that ends up coming out. So I remember having that kid's blood on me, on my
Mm.
mouth, and stepping out on the back porch and have to go to the station, wash his blood off my face, and then like it was later that day, some lady called because her fucking house got egged, and I was just like, "Fuck you, lady," you know what I mean? Like, get a hose, wash it off,
Right.
that was one of those days I could have lost my job and just totally just went off on that lady, and but played the game and was able to do that. Well, through EMDR therapy, I was able to tie that situation to the riot, and
Oh,
then
wow.
to an incident um, in my childhood where my dad was drunk and held a knife to my neck.
Mm.
So being able to link all three of those things together was kind of like an eye opener on like, okay, maybe I need to unpack some more of this shit and really,
Yeah.
get to the bottom of it. And I'll be the first to say, I'm not a fan of people that go to therapy as a habit and make it part of their identity. You know what I mean? Like, go work through your shit, get to a good spot, and then move on. You know what I mean? And then maybe, follow up every 3 months or something like that. But,
Yeah,
you
it's
know,
like the maintenance that one can do, and I think you can do pre maintenance too, right? You can the like the stuff that I teach is all about preparing oneself, training the nervous system to be flexible, so that when you go, if you decide to go and you need to go to that therapy or do some of these deeper strategies of resetting and recovery, you have the flexibility to do that. You can start early, and I say start early and do it often. Um, so going through that and knowing that you're making a conscious choice to do that, how was that for you mentally?
um, it was tough. You know what I mean? Like, there were some hard realizations to kind of accept. You
Sure.
um, police work's all about integrity, but when you realize you've been lying to yourself and being like, "Oh, I'm still that fucking soldier in the mirror," the fuck I was a big fat slob. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
like starting to work on, getting my body healthy, getting my mind healthy, because those two have to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You cannot look in the mirror and not like the person that you are, and then have your head in a good spot.
Right.
You know?
Facts. There's a huge body mind connection that
Yeah,
is so critical to
yeah.
one's
And
success.
vice versa. You could have a perfect physique and not have your head right and still be miserable.
Yeah.
You know. Um, so those two things have to coincide. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
you know it's if it's not, it's like oil. Oil and water. You know what I
Right.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
if that's how you see yourself and you feel a certain way, like that shit's never gonna that it's never gonna jive.
Yeah.
So,
Agreed.
by realizing how disgustingly out of shape I was,
Yeah.
I made the conscious decision to start hitting the gym, the conscious decision to, go to therapy and
Hmm.
do that stuff. And I'll tell you what the real game changer for me was, ETMS therapy, the transcranial magnetic stimulation.
Oh, interesting.
Um, Man, I went through that, and like, I kind of equate it to like you're running at like 5,000, 6,000 RPM
Yeah.
on a normal basis. And
Hmm.
then, so it's nothing for you to jump up, to 9, because you're pretty fucking close anyways, you know.
Yeah.
So after I got done, and it wasn't even when I got done with that therapy, it was probably about halfway through or three-quarters of the way through. Um, my daughter comes out in the kitchen, and I looked at her and I was like, "Is that my hunting jacket?" And she had taken it and cut like the zipper out and made like a little vest out of my hunting jacket from my fucking closet. you know, and
Uh-huh.
like totally calm. I was like, how would you like it if I went into your room and took some of your volleyball sweatshirts or something, you know what I mean, and cut them up, and just, and normally I'd have just lost my shit and started yelling, and
Right.
that's when I kind of realized like, oh man, this is working, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
and ever since then, like my sleep's been better, um, my relationships have been better. I've been
Hmm.
way more calm and been able to, like, you still get angry, but you can
Sure.
focus on just one thing. You know, a lot of times when we get pissed off, we spiral out and we're like,
Yep.
oh, and last week you fucking did this, and 2 months ago you did this. You know what I mean?
Right.
And,
Right.
you know, so you're
Yeah.
able to
Yeah.
stay on topic a little bit better.
Yeah. I love it, man. Having that awareness, like that's the awareness,
Right.
because and I think it's interesting too because um, it allows you to see things from a different perspective, right? You don't see um, the hurt necessarily that it caused. Like just thinking about that scenario um, where you didn't, you got to a place where you didn't get upset with that. You had that conversation about personal space and about taking somebody else's things and for your own benefit, but then probably potentially taking it a step even further, you see this creative expression that came through that was like, oh, I'm creative too. Now I'm seeing this in my daughter also that I can appreciate. So yeah, we're gonna have a conversation about where to get the garment to do the creative work on.
Right.
But damn, cool vest, right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, but I'd have been more than happy to take her to Goodwill and go find something for her to
right.
cut up. You know what I
That's
mean?
what I'm
So,
saying. Like, yep,
yeah, and she is one of the most, her artistic ability and writing ability is amazing. I mean, she's
yeah,
super smart, and we were going through some of her stuff and looked at her notes from her human bodies and like the stuff with the heart. Like all of her stuff was like, not only was it colored, but it was like shaded. You know what I
yeah,
mean? And
yeah,
all of her notes were in different colors depending on if it had to do with the arterial system or vascular system or whatever, and it was
yeah. This is
it was
awesome.
pretty awesome, and
It definitely. Go ahead. Go ahead. I don't
oh
want to
no,
cut
go
you off.
ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say, like that brings up like two of the things, like this creative aspect that you're seeing in your daughter, plus the writing. Um, it's what you did, right?
Yeah,
You started getting yourself together, your physical being, your mental capacity. You started adjusting those. Your why was big, so the how was easy,
right.
and you started adjusting that. And when you did, you had this capacity to write this book, like
Yeah,
or
so
dive back into this book.
yeah, so I started this book and then I kind of shelved it, and I mean every couple months I'd maybe write a chapter or whatever.
Right.
And then I was able to get it done. Um, I was able to get it written, but then I just shelved it for like a year and a half, you
Hmm.
know. And it wasn't until I got into a better space mentally and physically that I was able to basically like tap back into that creative side of myself and
Yeah.
sit down, finish editing it, get it published, and get it out. And super proud of it. Um, I use a lot of my experience as an investigator and 30-year law enforcement to basically my. It's about a G-man that's a serial killer. He's a off the books cybersecurity expert that works for one of those non-named branches of our government, and but every murder that he commits, I would challenge any investigator or detective to look at the basic facts of those, and you wouldn't even classify them as murders, which is the perfect way to get away with it. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
if it wasn't for this paranormal connection, um, to this girl where she's actually seeing these murders real time, and she
Mm.
just thinks they're daydreams. So she's writing about them in a blog, and it doesn't come out until uh, there's a detective on a scene, and there's two patrolmen talking about this girl's blog, and she
Wow.
she overhears it, and she's like, "Hey, wait a minute, say that again." And it was literally one of the scenes that she had worked.
Oh, wow.
So then she links up with Angela, which is my main character in the book, and that's when Angela finds out, like, holy shit, these murders are really happening. You know what I mean? And it
Wow.
kind of spirals from there. Um, there is a rogue FBI agent in there that kind of, he's an asshole. Everybody hates him, and but he keeps going after Angela because she's writing about these murders, and he just doesn't believe that she's seeing them, kind of telepathically. So he just
Wow.
thinks that she's got something to do with it, and all that, even though
Yeah.
there's alibis, solid alibis for it. He just refuses to believe it. So, um,
Wow.
but
And
because
and this is, um, how was that process of writing? How was that process of writing this, like this book? Because again, as a creative person, as somebody that can so appreciate that kind of stuff, how was it for you to write this, and how does it feel to have it out there?
I'll tell you what, it feels great to have it out there, and the process, it kind of really depended on where I was at. Now, when I was able to actually sit down and edit it and get it ready to actually publish, that felt wonderful. You know what I mean? Like, I was in a better spot. I was able to focus on it. And before, it was at times like just one of those, like, it's kind of like cleaning out the garage. You know what I mean? Like, I got this project started and I got to get it fucking done. You know what I mean? And kind of
Yeah.
like force myself to write it. And then there's other times that I'd be kind of more relaxed or whatever, and I'd be able to knock out 2 or 3 chapters. But to be able to craft a story like that just from from out of your head is pretty awesome. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
like somebody coming to you and being like, well, I don't know. They don't come to you with a picture they want. They come to you with an idea. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
you're just able to, like, use your own mind to create that for them. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, it's
I do know what you mean. It's really it's a gift, and I'm so blessed to have had those experiences of being able to represent somebody's idea in an image, and then allow them to wear it.
yeah,
It's super powerful, man. And I think it's so cool that you were able to take some of the moments in your life where that created this trauma, and you were able to shift it and turn it into something that was creative, and that is going to bring a lot of people a lot of good times reading it, and excitement, and uh, and I think the crux of this is to go back to that you did the work. You did the personal development work that it took to start to remedy those relationships. And it first took you remedying yourself, right? We don't help others if we're confused or disturbed ourselves. So you got down and did the work physically, mentally. It wasn't a stigma to you. I love the "Are you okay" T-shirt that you're wearing today.
yeah,
Break the stigma. You said, no, fuck that. I'm going to do the work that it takes to get myself to a place where I can be that guy again for my family, first for myself, then for my family, and then so that I can be benefit to others, man. And it's that chain that you just told in this story of, like, taking yourself from that person that you didn't like. Yeah, you were doing some good for people, but it was having a detrimental effect on everybody else around you. And
right.
you shifted yourself so that you could help shift other people's experience, so that you could bring benefit to a greater number of people. I love it, man. It's
Yeah,
such a great story.
I'm just super fortunate that, you know, my daughter's had 4 suicide attempts from the
Hmm.
just from depression and anxiety and stuff like that. I'm just fortunate that she's still here, um,
Yeah.
for me to be able to rebuild that, you know, relationship. And, you
Yes.
know, we're in a really good spot now. We joke, you know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
there'll be times like I'll go to pick something up and she'll be like, Dad, don't beat me. I'm like, I've never beat you in my life. You know what I mean? So just,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, just having that fun together. Um, and she's on a competitive volleyball team and is an awesome volleyball player. And
Cool.
we've done a lot of traveling because of that. And that's a lot of fun too. You know what I mean? Not only are we going to places we've never been before, but we're doing it together.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is pretty awesome.
Dude, it's got to feel, I've been in those places where I've had tension with my kids and, you know, coming out of a divorce and for many years. And you have to, what I had to do, and oftentimes what people have to do is wait it out, you
Yeah.
know, and show up the way that you want to show up consistent, and to get past that, man, I can see it in your face. I can feel that energy, that it is, you're so grateful for it, that you have this moment now to live. And,
And you know, I talked about my oldest son. Um, he's got 2 babies now, and they're awesome.
God damn,
He's an
cool.
awesome dad. Um,
Yeah.
you know, and there's nothing better than watching your kids succeed and other
Yeah.
people. And I'm very grateful for all that.
Yeah, I feel it, brother. I feel it, man. And I appreciate you sharing about it. And it's been, you know, it's been really cool for me to hear your story, to see what you're doing on Instagram, sharing, to, hear that you got over that hump of that book and you got it out to the world, this creative thing that was inside of you. Man, it's inspiring.
Yeah.
And again, I appreciate it. Where do people get this book? How can they support that? And this is a law enforcement psychological thriller, brother, with some
Yeah.
paranormal activity. Let's
Yeah.
go.
So the book is available on Amazon. It's called Murderous Daydreams. You can either search me, my author page and bio's on there, um, or you can go to my website. It's badkarmapublications.com,
Hmm.
and you can pick up a signed copy there. I've got um, some Bad Karma Publications T-shirts that you can pick up, and then I developed my own personal challenge going. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
And actually had this made to give the guys, because I was leaving the task force and going back to the department, so I wanted to make sure that, you know, I gave them, you know, kind of a parting gift and all
Yeah.
that. And I don't know if
Cool.
it's in focus there or not, but then
Yep.
on the
Love
back
it.
right there, you know, there's the hammer of justice, you know, with the scales on there, and the saying on there says, "And we shall spread our blackened wings and be the vengeful, striking hammer of God."
Mm, I love it, man.
Yeah.
Powerful. Powerful, brother. Well,
So, yeah, if any, you know, any support on the book would be amazing. Even if you just share it, or you know somebody that reads, get it for them for a gift or something like that. And had a huge spike last week. We jumped up like 220,000 spots and rankings on Amazon in 25
I
hours.
love it.
Amazing.
I love it, man. Well, one of the things that I think would be fun to do here on the show as we wrap. Um, One, I appreciate the story and appreciate you sharing so openly. We ended on a little lighter note. You have a lot of tattoos. I've been a tattooer for many years. You have a favorite tattoo story?
Um, yeah, actually. So this one right here, um,
Hmm.
after my dad passed away, and you know, we didn't even get into that. My dad was an alcoholic and drank
Hmm.
himself to death.
Mm.
But his Native American name was the Eagle That Sees. And he always drew something similar to that, but it was, you know, kind of rudimentary. You know, had the
Yeah.
antlers and the, you know, the eye and the beak or whatever. So that's probably my favorite
Cool.
tattoo there. And then big shout out to Luke over at Groundworks Tattoo. I had a guy totally butcher this this phoenix, and
Yeah.
it was so bad. And we're trying to figure out like what to do with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he was like, "Man, I see a buffalo
Yeah.
in
Cool.
there," and was able to just kind of use that phoenix and stuff as a mask, and then we threw that buffalo on there. So basically saved that shoulder from looking like a shitty tattoo because all the others are pretty good.
Yeah.
The other one is this headdress right here.
Okay.
It's kind of hard to see in the camera, but there's a scar right there.
Okay. Yeah.
It goes over, and I wanted that headdress for a long time, and my my tattoo artist was like, "Man, I ain't doing shit with that until you get that mold checked out," and it was fucking skin cancer.
Wow.
So literally, my tattoo artist saved my life.
Yeah. Good for them too, man, because, there's, as a tattooer, I understand like you shouldn't tattoo over moles. It can exacerbate that stuff
Right.
and kick it off. And so kudos to that person for saying, hey, no, go get that checked out, and then we'll do a badass tattoo over it. So
Yeah, and when I looked at it, you know what I mean. Like, I never thought, I was like, oh, that's kind of a funky mole or whatever. But then when I looked at like the signs of skin cancer, it was like
yeah,
all of them. You know what I mean? It
yeah,
looked like
yeah.
Australia. It had a fucking mountain, one thick ass black hair growing out of it, and it was different
Oh
colors.
shit.
I was like, so yeah,
Amazing.
he literally saved my life. So
Dude, what a great story. What a great story. Shout out to the tattooers that are saving lives.
yeah,
Amazing.
yeah, for
So,
sure.
well, comment if you're seeing this on YouTube, should throw a comment, your favorite tattooer, tag them, your favorite law enforcement officer, tag them. What's your favorite tattoo story? What's your favorite law enforcement story? Let's start getting some comments in there that people can read and get some excitement and some enjoyment out of. Go support Orion's book. You can find that on, you said Amazon or at badkarmapublications.com.
Yep.
Go support. It's amazing. If you're in law enforcement and you are heading down this path and you want to get in front of it, or you are wanting to just be high performance, go and get the Tactical Resilience Training System. You can find that link in my bio at Joe Swanson Tactical on Instagram. You can find it on the website and go check it out. It is a stack of, what you're going to learn is the operational reset stack. This is a methodology of not just using one wellness technique, but stacking them in a way that you are going to get the best response from it. Train your nervous system so that the other things that you train are better. So again, Tactical Resilience Training System brought this podcast to you today. Go support, and we'll see you in the next episode. Enjoy your right now
Good
and
one.
stay sharp.